And in September, it was September 27th, I believe, the night before, I was down over in the woods, and we built a little pulpit, Dad and I did. And so he did a lot of his messages there when the COVID stuff was really height and everything. But so I was down there practicing. And so after, I'm pretty sure about 2 or 3 squirrels came forth, but just kidding. But anyway, if you have your Bibles, I'm going to be flipping around and looking at a bunch of scriptures here. The title of my message is Invading the Heart. And today we're going to talk about some heart issues that could be going on today in our lives and in our culture as well. But of course, I kind of put a nature spin to it because that's kind of my flavor of speaking. Have y'all ever heard of Brad Stein? He's a good person to look up. I found him on YouTube, and he kind of said something, or on his channel, he kind of said something I kind of took to heart. He said that he always thought he wanted to be a comedian, and he does do comic stuff. But he also speaks about the culture war. And so he said, I think God gave me the gift of public speaking, but comedy is the flavor of it. So I kind of took that to heart. And but anyway, there's so many things in our world that can invade our minds, and Satan can use these things and tries to use these things to replace God in our lives off the throne. And today, I want to relate some of the experiences I've had with invasive plants to talk to you about some of the things that can invade our hearts. 1 Peter 5:8 is... So 1 Peter 5:8 says, be self-controlled and alert. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. How many of y'all have a garden? Like to work out in the garden? I know Dad loves to work out in the garden, and my grandpa Bob really loved it too, and I do as well. Of course, if you don't tend to that garden, you're going to have a lot of weeds and things, fall grass, and things kind of pop up. And that's kind of what I'm talking about. If you don't take care of your garden or tend to your garden, weeds are going to pop up, and you're going to have to constantly be pulling, mowing, or weed eating in your garden. By the way, at the hardware store where I work, we do have some weed killer if you're interested. So they can become a problem if not kept in check, and that's what an invasive plant or animal is. I do have a PowerPoint, and I want to show you some of the plants that can invade. I'm going to go kind of point by point, but there's the first. So here's some stats or fun facts about invasive plants and animals. Invasive species cost the U.S. around $120 billion each year. Around 6,500 plants and animals have been identified as invasive, and America loses $13 billion annually to crop damages caused by invasive insects. So who all have had maybe a white ash tree die in their yard in the past few years? I know we've had to cut down about half a dozen. The picture on the far left, it's kind of blurry, but that was the ash tree up by our garden. And it's now, of course, we took it down because that little bug in the middle, emerald ash borer, or I call it EAB for short, he can fit right up on a dime. And what they do is they eat the inside layer of the tree, where all the water and the food goes up the tree, and that kills the tree. So you can see on the right, and you all might have seen that in your, like in your yard or woods of your trees, what that happens is just the bark just strips off. And so, excuse me. In America, so far, it has destroyed 150 to 200 million of these trees. And in Ohio, 1 out of every 10 trees was ash. So you can see this destruction, how it can have an effect on our woods and our environment, our ecosystem. Now, moving along, this first plant I want to talk about is garlic mustard. And that's actually a picture I took down in Kentucky. And it's growing, it grows a lot down there. This plant is native to Western Europe, and but was introduced to North America in the 1860s. The flower-sized plant can grow almost anywhere, and once it's in an area, it's hard to remove. And it gets its name from the garlic-like smell that is released when the plant is crushed. And so Luke 12:15 says, Then he said to them, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist of abundance of his possessions. The United States is a blessed nation. Because of the men who founded this country on the belief of God and his word, we have abundance of material possessions and other blessings. But this can lead to trouble, because we can often lean on these abundance or these blessings instead of him. Fact is, our country has turned into an individualistic mindset with a fast food service mentality. Some say we need more and more to make us happy, but in reality, it's only temporary satisfaction compared to the eternal joy found in Christ Jesus. In Matthew 6:19 through 21, part of the Sermon on the Mount, talking about your treasures in heaven, says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Greed is thinking to ourselves over others, or thinking of ourselves over others. Is wanting more and more, but God has something different for us in mind. He tells us to be thankful for what we have. If we have a great abundance, not to keep us to ourselves, but to share with others. There's an elder at the church I go to, and his name's Danny Slisher, and he has a good job, and he has some. Or he has a lot of different things, and so in turn he kind of blesses other people with that. And so Dad and I have gone out there fished before and different things, and he's been very generous. And so it doesn't matter how much you have; it just matters like what you do with that and what God has, how much God has given you. Yeah. You ever have like a thought and it just like, what just happened? So, but what God has given you, we're stewards of, and so it doesn't matter how much or how little. As if we trust him with that, he will bless us. So, Proverbs 15:27 says, a greedy man brings trouble to his family, but he who hates bribes will live. Greed can lead to habits such as gambling, which is sadly a big business here in America. Even if it's playing the lottery, sometimes Satan will use small steps to try to remove God from the place in our hearts. Greed is basically saying, I don't trust God to take care of me, so I'm going to take all I can get. That's not the mentality as Christians we should promote. Jesus said to put others before ourselves. There's a little acronym that I use, and you probably heard it as well. It's joy. And how we can find real joy is, of course, we pray and ask God, but joy stands for Jesus, others, yourself. So if we follow those three different, if we follow that acronym, then we're going to find joy. The second thing I was going to talk about this morning is this one. I kind of switched this out with another one. This is poison hemlock, and that picture is actually between Sharpsburg and Chester Hill. It's at a state forest. But so it's a tall flower that grows 3 to 10 feet, introduced in the United States in the 1800s, and people planted it as a garden plant. Lives up to its name because it is kind of toxic to people and animals, so don't eat that. But it kind of has like a poison ivy kind of thing. It might give you a rash and things like that. But pride can turn into poison if not kept in check. Hosea 13:6 said, "When I fed them, they were satisfied. When they were satisfied, they became proud. Then they forgot me." The scripture refers to when God was angry at Israel because they only relied on him in times of need. But when God gave them the blessings that they needed, they forgot about God. And if you read back in Exodus in the Old Testament, you can kind of, and Joshua, and you can kind of read Israel's back and forth with God. And so when life is going good, we keep God out of the picture until crisis hits or something has happened. Sometimes we can get in that mentality. Being a follower of Christ doesn't mean that you won't struggle or suffer. Anybody seen God's Not Dead? I know it's kind of an older, but it's a good movie. If you haven't seen it yet, it's a good one to watch. Dean Cain, who also plays Superman, he plays the role of Mark, which is a very successful businessman who seems to have the perfect life according to him. But his mother is in a nursing home, and he doesn't really go see her until the last day, until she almost is on her deathbed. So when he finally goes and visits, she says something very interesting that he wasn't expecting. He said, "Sometimes the devil allows people to live a life free of trouble because he doesn't want them turning to God. Their sin is like a jail cell, except all nice and comfy, and there doesn't seem to be any reason to leave. The door's wide open until one day time runs out, and the cell door slams shut, and suddenly it's too late. Pride can easily turn into a lifestyle. The thoughts that I don't need anybody or I can do this all by myself. The opposite of being pride is humble or humility. Jesus says in Matthew 18, 2 through 6, he says, "He called the little children and had them stand among them. And he said, I tell you the truth, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever humbles himself like a child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever becomes like a little child, and whoever welcomes a little child like this in my name welcomes me. But if anyone causes one of these little ones to believe in me to sin, it would be better for him to have a large millstone hung around his neck and drowned into the depths of the sea." As you can see, Jesus really cares for children, and we should too. Being humble is not thinking that you're better than others. Being humble is not thinking that you're better than others, but it's putting others before yourself. But pride would say, look at me, but humility would try to lift others up instead. It's just a matter of mindset. We all struggle with pride, especially guys. I have a lot from time to time. But I think we're kind of wired that way in a sense. Sometimes we have an attitude of wanting something done our way or no way, or our way or the highway. But God says we are to trust in Him and strive for His will and not our own. Besides, His ways are better than ours. The last plant I want to show you this morning is something you might be really familiar with. That's the flower, but that's multiflora rose. And have you all heard of briars? Have you all walked through a pair of briars? You usually have to wear a pair of Carhartts or tough boots. You also walk through them, you feel them as well. So it is imported from Asia as a natural fence row. And actually a fun fact is that one of the reasons it was planted by railroad tracks to keep cattle from venturing on to the track. So, but it's also has a pretty flower as you see there. But it spreads quickly and is now a common plant around our area. Once established in an area, it's hard to remove because the thorns make it a pest. I've been cutting this back every winter for the past probably decade or so, or more. And of course, it just keeps coming right back. But we had a gentleman come with, of course, we timbered a lot of the trees on our property this past fall, or this summer. And after that, we had a gentleman come with a skidder and make a road or a kind of a right-of-way to our bottom. And so where he made that road, there was a bunch of multiflora rose. And so let's just say I found a new hero because he cleared out all that multiflora rose for me. So, on the flip side, since every dark cloud has a silver lining, these plants are good for a bird's nest because the thorns actually protect the nest from snakes and other predators. So it does have some good things about it. In 1 Peter 2:1, it says, "Therefore rid yourself of all malice and all deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind." The definition of malice is to plot evil against someone. When sin entered the world, in Genesis, we read about the first count of malice, and it was carried out into the world's first murder. So if you want to flip over to Genesis chapter 4, verse 2 through 8. And it says, "Later she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept the flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. Abel brought the fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel because of his offering. But Cain, his offering, did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, 'Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it.' Now Cain said to his brother Abel, 'Let's go out into the field.' And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him." This was a very extreme account of malice. Well, what do we think about when the word malice comes to mind? It could be bullying a kid at school, calling somebody a bad name. Malice doesn't have to be extreme to be bad. It all starts with our heart. I'm sure we had times where somebody has cut us off in traffic. And we were wondering what they were thinking. And but at the same time, they could have been doing something kind of, we don't know what their thought process was at the time. So, malice can just hurt. Malice has thorns just like multiflora rose has thorns, and they can hurt. Paul says in Philippians 4:8, it says, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." Paul is calling us to renew our minds and to think about good things. Excuse me. And to shun evil desires. Excuse me. With invasive plants, they can easily overtake an area and change a habitat to where it's unrecognizable. So the woods around here, for the most part, are pretty clear, and you can walk through. But when I was working down in Kentucky, they had a lot of bush honeysuckle, and it's kind of just like a bush, but it overtakes the woods, and so it's really hard to walk through it. And so at one time, those woods were really nice and clear, and now it's kind of thick, and you can't really walk through it. So it kind of leaves it looking actually pretty bad. So it's hard for animals to walk through that as well. And that's the same thing that sin can do to our hearts. Satan can take our hearts and leave it unrecognizable after a while, and we become a totally different person. So all it takes is one or two, three plants to be unnoticed. And then one day turns to two, and you don't pull that plant, and then you have to take a shovel, a track hoe, or just something else to dig them out because there's a lot more of them. In the book of Colossians, Paul writes to the church saying in Colossae, if you want to turn to Colossians 3, excuse me. Colossians 3, 5 through 9. It says, "Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature, sexual morality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is adultery. Because of these, the wrath of God is coming. You used to walk in these ways from life you once lived, but now you must rid yourself of all such things as these: anger, rage, malice, slander, and filthy language from your lips. Do not lie to each other, since you have been taken off your old self with its practices." These are the tools Satan will use to try to remove God from our lives. They can invade and if not dealt with, it can overtake our heart in time and lead us down a dark path. But God had called us to a greater purpose. And Paul, if you jump down there to verse 12 through 14, Paul says later on in that passage, he says, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity." Just because we live in this world doesn't mean we have to conform to it. We're called to stand out. We don't have to look, the fact is we don't have to look very far today. Satan is at work all around us. And the thing is, we have instant access with TVs, phones, Facebook, smartphones, and we constantly have to filter our minds and what is good and what is evil, and what is wrong and what is right. we can take a look at this issue or that issue, but until we submit to God and change our hearts, we're only putting on a Band-Aid to an already existing deep wound. Ravi Zacharias was one of the most known Christian apologists in our time. He points out that if we can talk about the left and the right, but it becomes useless if we forget about the up and the down. Jesus said we're all aliens in this world. Our sights should be on which is heaven and heaven above. Everything on earth will fade, but the word of God will last forever. So how do we fight this temptation? Because we're all tempted. Jesus said Jesus was tempted by Satan. A great way is to read our Bible and pray. I know it kind of sounds simple, but if it's not broke, you don't need to fix it. So even if it's something, it's really important to get into the Word each day, even if it's only for a certain amount of time, because any time spent in the Word is going to be more. It's going to be better. You're going to have a better day because of that. But the thing is, our body kind of needs nourishment, and if we don't feed it, it will die, or we will die. And kind of like our body, our soul, our spirit needs nourishment as well. And if we don't get into this Word and talk to the Father on a daily basis, our spiritual life will die and we'll kind of go backward. The thing is, this is a new day. God has brought us here for a reason and purpose. Today, if you're not a Christian, it would be a perfect time to accept Jesus. No matter what is invading your heart, you can come find rest in Him. God is bigger than your fears, troubles, and the lies we tell ourselves. The fact is, we're not good enough, and nobody is. Only one was. Jesus is. The thing is, we all need Jesus, because apart from Him, we're just living a life we're confused, trying to find purpose and happiness that can only be found in Him. There's a lot of different things people turn to today that without Christ, can lead them down a dark path pretty quick. And this is why we need to get in the Word every day, and we need to be praying on a daily basis. But I hope that stuck with you this morning, and I know that God has spoken to me as well. And we're going to stand and sing our communion meditation, or communion invitation.